Let's start this exploration by exploring the function of sex. If we look at what sex is, it is the synergistic combination of two into something bigger. So, synergy, the combination of parts to create something greater than either of the parts combined. And so an example of that would be, a battery, a cylinder, some wire, a light bulb creating light. So the light is a synergy of those different components. When two people come together and conceive a child, the child has a greater possibility field, statistically speaking, than either combined. Because this is how evolution is built in, meaning the mother learns and brings whatever she has brought from her family system. The father learns and brings whatever he has brought from his family system. And let's be clear that all family systems are winners in the larger scale of things. 99.9% of all species are radically transformed or extinct. So we're part of a 1% of a winning species, along with all the other species on the planet today. Now also, 99.9% of all the people are dead. We're part of a current less than 1% iteration of this species that made it, that through a combination of luck and skill and protection and, blessings from past ancestors, we're here. And most of the species has not been born yet or no longer is here. So anything that is alive today has made it, so to speak, right? Anything at all that exists today is part of an iteration of energy over the course of billions of years that in many ways is the fruit of those billion years. What's here today emerged out of the Big Bang and all the many steps along the way. And the way life propels forward, evolves, becomes more intelligent, is by combining two things so as to create something more intelligent, a third thing that has a bigger possibility field than those before. In other words, a human being born today has a higher probability field, a bigger probability field, a bigger possibility field than a human born 1,000 years ago. And 1,000 years is a blink in the eye in life's pattern, in life's unfolding. And we're not just more potentiated today with possibility. We're perhaps 100 times more in just 1,000 years. An average human born today has 100 times more probability and possibility than a human being born 1,000 years ago. And that probability and possibility, certainly the possibility, is symmetrical, right? So a single human being, and as the possibility field expands, it expands in all directions. So on the destructive side, a single human being at the limits of destructive possibility today can obliterate the entire planet with nuclear weapons. One human being can obliterate the planet with nuclear weapons. And the same human being has the possibility of making life multiplanetary, of curing disease, of bringing a data set into being that propels us radically towards, humanity, towards empathy, a world worth living for. One human being can do that. And as the possibility field continues to expand, right, the negativity that is possible becomes darker, and the positivity that is possible becomes lighter. You don't normally see an asymmetrical expansion of possibility. And probability is, of course, contained within possibility and can predispose a generation, a group of people, towards the destructive or constructive side. But how evolution works is by continually rewarding intelligence. And how intelligence works is the ratio, or the measure of intelligence is the ratio with which energy is transformed into sustainable well-being. So, from the moment that the Big Bang has occurred, life has been operating within a protocol of create more space, create more time, differentiate, distinguish between itself. It's very hard to differentiate. You didn't see a table and a chair and a Macintosh computer coming out of the Big Bang, right? Now, maybe there were 3 or 4 different gases initially. And so that was the first distinction, right? As the universe gets bigger, then there are certain parts of the universe that have colder temperatures. So the universe interacting with itself develops differently in those cooler areas. And there are other areas that have hotter temperatures, and those develop differently. And so the universe, from the moment it has begun, has been getting bigger and longer. Time has expanded from the first moment until the present time, and space has expanded from the first moment. And the more time and space expands, the more the raw energy within the universe differentiates, evolves in different ways. And the more it becomes distinct into different minerals in the mineral table, different molecules, different atomic structures, the more it distinguishes itself, the higher the possibility field of interaction. You can think of a number system, right? If you have 1, you have no possibility field of interactivity, right? What can you do with the number 1 mathematically? The only thing you can do is divide it, but you can't really do anything with it until you start dividing it. Well, but once you divide it, now you've got 2, right? So the more life divides itself into distinctions, the greater the possibility field, because every distinction, every gas has and can have a relationship with all the other types of gases. Every atom can and has a relationship with all the other types of atoms. Every mineral has and can have a relationship with all the other minerals, right? And so as different pieces, different distinct patterns of energy relate to other patterns of energy, in some of those cases, the procreative nature of sex is possible, and something new, a third thing happens that is different than either one, and a new pattern is brought into being. And that's sex. At the grandest scale, the function of sex is to bring two or more patterns of energy together and co-create, give birth to a third pattern, a new pattern of energy that is sustainable. Meaning, if it just comes and then withers out the next day, if sunlight and water and soil and this mineral comes together and a seed is germinated, but as soon as the seed opens up, its leaves can't tolerate the environment and it dies, and that's the end of that seed. No more. That's the end of that species of plant. Well, that's not very productive sex, right? But if something emerges in the confluence of those patterns that becomes sustainable, then something very interesting happens. The possibility field expands exponentially. And you can look at it like this. If we count, we've taken the 1 and we've now divided it into, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So if we have, a 4 grid and a 5 grid, we could say that the possibility field is 20. Now it's actually a little bit more than that, but just to get the point across, let's just say that that's 20. If we add a 5th possibility grid field in the grid here, now it's 5 times 5. So if you look at the unit 4 multiplied by 5, we got 20. But now we add one more unit to the grid, to the possibility field. And we've got 5. We're going from 4 to 5. We're adding 1 unit. But we've now got 25 in the possibility field. So by adding 1, we don't get 21. 4 times 5 plus 1 is 21. We get 5 times 5, which is 25. And we can also see this a little bit easier if we look at if we look at a circle and how we create it as a grid. We can say 1, 2, 3, right? And so within 3, we only have 3 distinctions, right? This line, this dot can relate to this dot, that's 1. And this dot relates to that, that's 1. This dot can relate to here, that's 1. This dot can relate to here, right? So we have these 3 units of energy. Now, if we add a 4th unit, a synergy, right, is emerging here. A triangle is emerging out of, so we have a triangle that doesn't exist with just 2, it only exists with 3. If we add a 4th dot to the circle, first of all, it has a relationship with the triangle. That is a new relationship that doesn't exist if the 4th entity isn't present. So we have a new relationship with the triangle. So that's 1 increase in possibility field. We also have the 4th unit has a relationship with this dot, and with this dot. So we go from 3 to 7 with 1 increase. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. We go to 8. We go to 8 in an increase in the possibility field by going from 3 to 4. So with 3, we have the possibility field of 4. And with 4, we have the possibility field of 8. That is a doubling of the possibility field. The possible relationships go up by double by adding a single digit. Now, what's interesting in this exponential return is everything is in relationship to everything. Everything is in relationship to everything. Let's look at that in a little detail. So number 1, we have time. It's getting bigger all the time, longer all the time. There's more and more time all the time, because time is composed of the past, present, and the future. And the more we go on, the more past there is. And the more complex the present is. So the present is getting bigger. It's getting bigger and bigger bandwidth. There's more and more going on. Each present moment gets wider because as the universe evolves, there's more and more going on. You can kind of think of the bandwidth of just human life as, a few hundred years ago, there was 1 billion people. Now there's 7 billion people. So in a single moment, now 7 billion people do things in a single moment. So if you measure what's going on in a single moment, it's now 7 times wider, 7 times bigger than what was going on in people's lives a few hundred years ago. So time, the past is getting longer, the present is getting wider, right? And as the present gets wider, the future gets bigger. So that's a massive expansion of time. That's expanding. Now, every moment in the present relates to the Big Bang. How? Well, it's a pretty strong relationship if the present moment can't exist without something. Meaning you try and get the present moment to emerge out of nothing without a Big Bang and evolution. It's hard. Nobody's been able to pull it off. Why should you be able to, right? So there's a link, let's say this is the present moment. Well, you were linked to your parents and their 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 parents, and that goes on for hundreds of thousands of years. And then perhaps you're linked to a primate, and that goes on for a few 100,000 years. And then perhaps the primate is linked to some other primate and some other primate and some other primate. And that primate emerged out of what? A fish, something. There is a link genetically, atomically, between what's going on now in your body and the Big Bang. If you follow the thread all the way back through time, first you're wherever you are, then you were a member of a different race, then your family came from a different continent. It seems the current theory or narrative is most of us came from the plains of Africa. Okay, right? So if Africa didn't exist, you don't exist. And we all came from the planet, so it seems, right? So if the planet didn't form some billions of years ago, you couldn't be sitting on it today. So that's a link between now and 4 billion years ago. And if there wasn't a galaxy in existence, the planet certainly couldn't just poof out of nowhere, right? And if there wasn't a Big Bang, none of us could be here today, right? So that establishes the link between the present moment and the beginning of all life. That's a pretty strong link. So what about the future? Physicists have explained that nothing is created or destroyed, it just changes. Energy, like when our body dies, this will stop being a hand after a period of time. Rapidly if we incinerate, and slowly if we use balms and preservatives, but in the next trillion years, this will no longer be a hand. What will have happened to it? Well, if you bury it in the soil, worms will have consumed it, taken nitrogen and fertilized a garden perhaps around us. Right. Everything in our body will turn into something else, a new form of life. And the same is true a trillion years from now. A trillion years from now, there will be things in existence that are not in existence today, but they will have grown out of the things that are in existence today in the same way that we have grown out of existence from the start of the Big Bang, right? So whatever is going on a trillion years from now will have emerged out of what's going on right now, which emerged out of the Big Bang, which connects time from the infinite future to the moment of the beginning. Our story is the Big Bang. Every cult, every culture has had a story, right? We all think we're right. And we all think that human mind can figure it all out. Well, that's our story. We're sticking to it. Now, the other thing is the link with space, right? So we're looking here at, a story of the sky, right? This is the sky and all the stars. So let's pick one of these stars over here, and let's just say it's 10 billion light years from this star over here, right? So what's in between? How is it linked? Well, there's lots and lots of stars and stuff in between. There's also light links them, right? If you give it enough time, and life will be around for the next trillion years and counting. So if you give it enough time, light can travel across all of these things. So that's a relationship in that one dimension. Now, there's also, black holes. There's subatomic particle dynamics that show that if you do something in one particle faster than the speed of light, something changes over here, right? So there are mysterious subatomic relationships that connect different space. But even if we just look at the just pure mathematics of things, here's our little star, here's our little star. Is there a void in between them? No. So, first of all, both of these stars were once inside the P, right? This was the universe some tens of billions of years ago, and it first began this big. And this star, or its potential energy, and this star were bedfellows, right? There they were. One was over here, the other one was over here, less than the size of a pea between them. And they've been explosively getting bigger and further apart. But they were once connected. Now, so that's a pretty strong connection, the connection of ancestry. The connection with the connection of just being part of life, right? So it was together, it came from the same source, it came from the same moment, and it's moving away from one another in many cases, right? So all of that is shared in common. So that's a pretty strong, cohesive, common narrative. But then there's also the fact that, we look at what's connecting our hand, right? We say that's space, and we say that that's nothing. But that's just because we don't have observing and measuring devices to witness all of the interesting patterns of energy that we call nothing. In other words, nothing does not exist. Space is a pattern of energy. Foggy space is a pattern of energy. Space with light going through it is a pattern of energy. So what we're calling nothing is a tremendously complex atomic chain that connects every single unit of the universe in one giant equation. In other words, the idea of a void or empty space does not exist. There are just things that aren't dense enough to register for the eyes or touch, right? So it doesn't register that this is, between this is something that my eyes can see or my ears can see, but a microscope can see it. A physicist can see it using a different apparatus. There is actually a link between every point in space and every other point in space. It's actually a united fabric. It's a united fabric of time. It is a united fabric of space. Now, if we understand that all things are connected through space and all things are connected through time, and in some cases, the connections are dense and rich and explosive, meaning what is done here, like if you're on a waterbed and someone jumps on the other side of the waterbed, you bounce, right? So, or you're on a trampoline and someone jumps on the trampoline, there's a very visible connection, right? But there is a connection on some dimension in some way between all things. Now, what that means is that, because we've just got to the pretend conceptual world where first there were three things that gave birth to a fourfold possibility field. We added a fourth thing, and we got 8. Well, if we add another one, say because we have here, 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 if we add another one, then you also potentially have, by the way, the synergy of this. So now if you add another one, it can have a relationship with here, a relationship with here, a relationship with here, a relationship with here, and a relationship with this synergy. And there could also be a synergy here that has a relationship with the other synergy there. So in other words, as you add one unit to the possibility field, there is an explosive exponential expansion of the possibility field. It's not linear. And the explosive and exponential nature of the possibility field goes up the more distinct patterns of energy there are capable of relating to one another, right? So in this sense, the possibility field of life is going up explosively and exponentially. It's getting bigger, and it's getting bigger faster. The possibility field is impregnated and giving birth to more possibility at a faster rate. So there are more and more and more things being born out of two or more things. And as they are born, what is born is being born faster and faster. There are more and more things being born per moment. And each thing has a possible relationship with every other thing in the universe. So with your birth, let's just pretend that by the time you were born, there were 10 trillion, trillion, trillion things in the universe. With your birth, the possibility field has expanded 10 trillion, trillion, trillion times because you were born. Because you were born, the possibility field has expanded 10 trillion, trillion, trillion times as a possibility field. Now, as a probability field, much less, right? But that's the probability field emerges out of. It's the square root of the possibility field. So it's much smaller, but the bigger the possibility field, the bigger the probability field. So that's a good return on investment, wouldn't you say? Like if you could put $1 and get 10 trillion, 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 trillion dollars as a return, that's what the possibility field is getting because one person is born. But it's not just a person. One monkey has a possibility field that of some relationship that is also 10 trillion things. One flower has a possible relationship with 10 trillion things. Now, what is possible is smaller for a flower than a human being, but not necessarily it's not quite as easy to calculate, because a human cannot give birth to another flower. A flower can, right? And who is to say, in the most objective sense, which possibility field is richer, right? Is better? It depends on the situation, right? It depends on the situation. So let's sum up what we're looking at in these diagrams. From the moment life has been born, it has been getting bigger and longer. Time has been getting bigger, space has been getting bigger. The bigger time and space becomes, the more diversified evolution of energy becomes. Because, like if you think of the Big Bang here, you think of the universe expanding around it, these bits out at the edge evolve differently than these bits here. These bits out of the edge then can have some kind of a relationship with this and have relationship with other things at the edge. And those give birth to new patterns of energy. These patterns also have relationships closer to here that give birth to new patterns of energy. And this is life having sex with life. It's two distinct patterns. So life diversifies, and then life meets itself, and some of the time, a third energy that is a synergy of both of those two emerges. And as those sustainable third energies take root, they add to the possibility field. They add to the number of distinctions that one can have sex with. Because sex is just the combining of two energies to create something new, something different. Now, if we look at sex then as the synergistic combination of energy, you can see that for human beings, there's mental sex, there's emotional sex, there's financial sex, there's physical sex, there's sexual sex, right? So there's genital sex, but two people can pool their capital to create a company that has a bigger possibility field than either person combined. Right? Two people can bring more happiness for one another than either could do on their own. Two people can create more suffering for one another than either could do on their own. Right? As the possibility field expands, it expands neutrally in all directions. Then depending on how we engage with the probability field, that can be more positive, more negative, however we define that in our language, more constructive, more destructive. But the possibility field expands based on the complexity involved. Okay, so life has been in the business of getting bigger, getting longer, becoming more and more distinct, adding distinctions, and then having those distinctions combine synergistically so as to give birth to more distinctions, which in turn have sex with other distinctions and give birth to more distinctions, so that the possibility field continually and exponentially expands from the moment of the Big Bang until the end of time. Life is getting bigger, it is getting more complex, time is getting longer, and the possibility field is expanding. Now, life has a pretty good track record, right? It's not bad to take a bit of energy this big, right? Let's all take a P, right? And we'll take a bet. Like, who's going to have the best return? Who's going to do something interesting with this little bubble of energy, over the next 30 billion years. Right? Who knows how to create a universe with a bit of energy this big? Right? Warren Buffett knows how to get 20%, roughly, give or take, over time with a few $1 billion. 20%. Life is exploding tens of billions of percent per moment because there's one more new thing being born throughout the universe in any given moment. There's actually billions. And as each new thing is being born, it has a possible relationship with all other things. That is billions upon billions of percent of possibility. And then it has a probability field that's the square root of that. It has an actual field that is the square root of that, but it's still, we're talking millions of percent return per moment. It's an incredible return on investment. So that's what life's been up to and will be up to for some time to come. So where do we fall within that process? Well, of all the many things that had sex with one another, that came together and emerged, slime came together and emerged, and plants came together and emerged, and fish came together and emerged, and birds came together and emerged, and mammals came together and emerged, reptiles, all of these things, and they just keep going on, right? And somewhere along the line, the human animal emerged. And somewhere along all of those experiments, all of those human animals had to have sex a lot. And some of them developed in a way that are our ancestors. But everything has been having sex from the moment life began. So we are the byproduct of trillions upon trillions upon trillions of sexual exchanges, of energies coming together, forming, and seeing what happened. And many of them, nothing happened. But we're part of the 1% where something happened. We're here in the midst of that vast possibility field, in the midst of that vast probability field, in the midst of that vast reality. We're here as a tiny, 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 tiny spark of life. And what does life want from us? It wants more time. The longer we live, the more time exists in our reality. It wants more space. And it wants diversity. And it wants creativity. It wants procreativity. To not just create, but to give birth to something more complex, more sophisticated than we are. Why does life want that? To exist. Because if life didn't have that as its protocol from the first moment, then the Big Bang would have been poof, and then it would have just stayed there. Nothing for the rest of eternity. Right? So life has to have a protocol of exploration, of expansion, of creativity, of sex, in order for life to continue. Right? And life has to have a lot of sex. Why? Because 99% of all the experiments that life is participating in die out. Right? A dandelion sends out seeds to impregnate the soil for miles. Wind comes, 1,000 seeds blow off. This one lands on a rock. That one lands in a lake. That one lands on someone's car tire. Extinguished. Possible, probable, but no dandelion. You see, if 3 dandelions out of 1,000 take root, life is a winner. Life's getting, a 300% compounding return on that investment in the generation of one dandelion. That's a winning dandelion. That's a winning bet. You see, and we like to think of ourselves as special and separate and all of that. But you see, life has invested in everything. Life's placed a bet on every one of those dandelion seeds. And when 3 of them win, life is a winner. One dandelion has turned into 3 dandelions, and life is a winner. And when dandelions die out and quackgrass takes over, life's a winner because life didn't just bet on dandelions, it bet on quackgrass. It bet on maple trees. It bet on this race, it bet on that race, it bet on this species, it bet on that species. Life bet on this planet, on this planet, on this planet. Life has taken out a bet on everything that ever has been, that is, or will be. Which means that no matter which horse wins at the races, life's there to collect. No matter which race rises, life's there to collect. No matter who wins the bet, life is part of both people betting, right? Life always wins because it bets on everything. Life bets on swamp plants. If the world becomes very swampy one day, the swamp plants will flourish. Life bets on desert plants. So if the world becomes very desert, there'll be all kinds of new cacti and plants that grow well in severe heat. But life's got more than 2 trillion planets to bet on and growing, right? It's getting bigger all the time. And life has an endless amount of time. There's no end of time. Life has a tremendous amount of free time. It doesn't have to pay rent. It just keeps creating, keeps growing, keeps giving birth to new patterns of energy. And 99% of them won't work. But the 1% that do will keep growing, will keep expanding in complexity, in time, in space, in intelligence. Life's got a winning hand. It cannot lose. Because the possibility field gets bigger every single moment. The probability field gets bigger every single moment, and the actuality of the totality of life gets bigger in every single moment. So we can easily be part of the 99% of planets that get snuffed out before this or that happens. But life's got bets on all the other ones as well. And if this one takes 1 trillion years to mature, life's got time. This one takes 5 trillion years before this planet gives birth to life. Life's got time. Life has short-term bets and long-term bets and wins every single time. And when this body decomposes and fertilizes the roses, life took a bet on those roses and life collects. So it's quite a good system, is what I'm getting at. It's better than any system that any cult, that any culture in history has ever come close to devising. It is better than any science or any priest. No one has figured out how to create universes. That means if we're intelligent, we must bow to the teacher. We must bow to expertise. If you want to learn, look to the best. And since no one in the history of life has outperformed life itself, We want to learn from life. And what life says is go out and have sex. Now, how does life convince animals, people, to go out and procreate and experiment in the world? Well, it's very simple. Life has made sexual release, the moment of orgasm, the single most pleasurable thing that a human being can do. It's made it free, right? Any two human beings can have sex for free if they want to, right? Life has made billions of humans to choose from, and life has programmed a biology of attraction. And the biology of attraction tends towards health, vitality, and admirable qualities. It's a pretty good code, isn't it? Like if you wanted to make sure that human beings continued to grow in intelligent and admirable qualities and attractiveness and health, how would you do it? Well, number one, you make the act of sex, you make the act of procreation the most pleasurable thing that any two people can do. Step one, right? Second, you increase the pleasure if there are beautiful genes rather than ragged genes, right? So people are drawn to symmetrical faces more than asymmetrical faces. And what does that mean? It means that those people have a more balanced physiology. It also may mean less trauma, less hardship. So life says, anyone, you can have sex with a bear, you can have sex with a carpet, you can have sex with yourself and it's going to be pleasurable. But life says it's going to be more pleasurable if you are attracted to the person. It's going to be more pleasurable if it's your species than if it's another one. Oh, you can have sex with a sheep. It's not going to be as pleasurable as with a person, right? So that's why. Why? Why is life programming same species sex? Like, why is it giving higher rewards and pleasure for a person rather than a sheep? Well, you're not going to impregnate a sheep. Life is not going to get bigger because of a sheep, right? You had sex with a sheep, right? Life doesn't have a new the possibility field hasn't expanded exponentially. You have sex with a person of the opposite sex, right? So life has programmed that the majority of people, so far as I can tell, the majority of people are attracted to having sex with the opposite sex. And the majority of people are attracted to having sex with people rather than animals or plants or wood, right? Life could have designed the attractiveness code so that anytime we saw a piece of wood, we just had to fuck it. Oh, there's a piece of oak there, gotta fuck it, right? But life didn't reward us for fucking wood. It rewarded us for fucking a human being. And statistically, it rewarded us for fucking a human being of the opposite sex. A human being capable of producing an entirely new life form that could inherit and learn from everything from both parents and take it to a whole new level. That's what life is rewarding, right? Now, what else is life is life rewarding? So life is rewarding beauty over ugliness. So symmetry over asymmetry. If someone has one arm and another person has two arms, biologically, we're not talking emotionally, psychologically, biologically, life says, go for the two-armed one. Why? Well, maybe the one-armed person is unlucky. And an unlucky person can't raise a child as well as a lucky person. Could be. Maybe the one-armed person is not going to be able to fight off predators from their child, and the child will die more than a two-armed person. Right? Now, life also rewards strength, right? Women like more muscular men biologically than not, right? So you have a fat, skinny person like me, and biologically, life doesn't like it as much as a compact, robust energy life form that could what? Provide better for a child, has a higher possibility field, right? So life is making sex more attractive to symmetrical and to muscular people. Life is making more attractive to taller people. Why? Well, they can run faster and they can hunt faster. Right? So life is prioritizing. Life has written a code that says if two highly healthy, now, why are young people so attractive? Well, it's perfectly simple. Young people create healthier babies. A 15-year-old woman may be able to conceive statistically the healthiest baby around. Right? Lots of stem cells present, right? Risk of Down syndrome very low, all this. Like a 15-year-old woman may be able to create the healthiest child imaginable on a biological level, right? So who are men statistically attracted to? Right? At that peak, right? 14, 15, 16, right? You have 150-year-old women, you have 115-year-old women. What does the male body respond to? The younger woman. Now, similarly, take 1,000 men, take 1,000 women. The majority of men are attracted to women who can still bear children on a biological level. Now, the majority of women are attracted to men who offer a context where the child has a good odds of success. Cult rank, financial rank, resources, so access to resources, height, ability to fight, ability to run, muscles, ability to get things done, accomplishment, purpose, competence, right? Females find competent males more attractive. Now, the same to some extent is true in reverse. Competence. Is this woman intelligent? That's more attractive, statistically speaking, right? So if you can find a young, healthy female. Now, and then there's other traits like loyalty. It's a good trait if you want to raise a child for 18 years. Right? That person is loyal. That person is symmetrical. That person is young. That person is disciplined. Why discipline? Well, it takes a lot of discipline to raise a child, right? So what life has done is created a code that allows the human species to have the highest probability of still being around in the next trillion years. We may not be, right? We could be all bogged down with political stupidity. And while that's happening, be hit by a comet, be hit by an asteroid, blow ourselves up, determined to be right? And then, well, life has a trillion other experiments running in real time. One of them are going to work out. They always do. Life has been on a winning streak for tens of billions of years, and it's not going to stop anytime soon because it's got a good recipe for success, for creativity. Right? So our body will tend to tell us what's good for biology. And our body loves sex with symmetrical people, loves sex with young people, loves sex with energetic people. Our body likes sex with lush hair. Why? Because it suggests a certain vitality, right? So as my hair slowly falls out, right, other people's bodies react less to my body than, when there's a full head of hair. And the same is true, it works both ways. So the body has a couple of heuristic ways to say, is this a really healthy person biologically? And that determines arousal. Then there are pheromones and signals that say, okay, this person is in a state where they can conceive a child. Increased arousal, right? So that's the biological code, and it's a winner, right? Life has been creating life for year after year, for billions of years, by following that code. This is a winning code. And the more sex there is, the more creativity there is, the more attraction there is, the more children there are, the more likely it is that some of them will grow into the future. And the more diversity, see, life creates diversity. Introverted people, extroverted people, detail-oriented people, grand, thinking people. I'm part of that mix. I like looking at concepts like this. I've devoted years of my life to exploring these ideas, which puts me in a very, very tiny minority of human beings in the history of humanity. But life thought someone like me was a good idea. And you're a bit different. And life thought you were a good idea as well. But really, the dirty secret, right? The truth. Life thinks experimentation, diversity, that's a great idea. Because the more diverse people there are, remember the Irish potato famine, right? This was a people, they liked potatoes, they grew fairly well in Ireland, and so they all planted potatoes. And then this particular potato grew the best, so they all planted this one type of potato. And it was 80% of their diet. And so when a blight killed off that one type of potato all across Ireland at the same time, they starved to death because they had no backup. You see, life doesn't do that kind of thing, except through humans, right? What life tends to do is create ecologies with hundreds of plants so that if this one gets a blight, well, then you eat some of the others, right? And potatoes that one variety of potato might have been the best variety, but if you'd used a different type of potato, the blight wouldn't have done both of them. If you did one that planted this time of year, one planted in this, diversify, right? Don't rely. And then don't be next to other countries that are in the same situation. Be next to other countries that are all growing different things so that you don't have the entire species dependent on one phenomena, right? Some should know how to sail, some should know how to fly, some should eat tomatoes, some should eat potatoes, some should eat this, some should eat that, some should be vegetarian. If all the species die out except humans, well, vegetarians will be fine. Some should be carnivores, right? If the vegetables get killed off, they're, So life just likes diversity. Why? Because life's whole plan from day one has been to bet on everything all the time and always win, right? So that diversification guarantees Ray Dalio, one of the best portfolio managers and successful hedge fund managers in history, has the all-weather fund. And what is it? He says, it's simple. You do a little bit of this, a little bit of this, a little bit of this, and then no matter what happens, you'll come out okay. You're not going to make a killing. You're not going to lose everything. You will survive. And that's what life wants. Another generation of successful survival. So that's life's plan. That's life's use for sex. That's life's plan for sex. That's how life has gone from the size of a pea to the universe today. That's how human beings have gone from a billion people, a little while ago to, 700% increase in a very short period of time is lots and lots of sex. And creating more and more technology that ensures that people live longer and survive more diseases and get healthier, right? So this is life's impulse working through humans to create more and more life. Now that's biology, that's life's plan. Now the cult is an entirely different thing. The cult is not life. Cults are, by definition, very exclusionary and very narrow, right? To be a cult member, part of a culture, you have to eat what other people eat in the culture. You have to dress the way other people dress, right? So whereas life is about betting in diversity, cultures are about establishing a status quo, a normalcy. And almost all cultures create a tremendous amount of regulation. Like life says, have sex, right? And the more sex, the better. Some of them are going to, some of it's going to pay off. But cultures are very different. Cultures say, you can't have sex with people under the age of 18, right? So let's cut this whole population, no sex there, right? And then cultures also say, it's not very, it's not very politically correct for people over the age of 60 or 70. They shouldn't really be having sex, so let's cut them off there. And then cultures say, people before they're married, they really shouldn't have sex. People while they're in school, they shouldn't have sex. Priests, no sex for priests. Doctors, they shouldn't have sex with their patients. Let's see, married people shouldn't have sex with other married people. Old people shouldn't have sex with young people. So that deletes a third right there. Families shouldn't have sex together. Life tends to agree with that, statistically speaking, but not in absolute terms, right? If a whole continent was wiped down, and two healthy young siblings were related, life might be better off conceiving a couple of children, giving birth to a new set. Now, diversity is best, right? Life likes people from different continents, etc., intermingling and adding all their diversity. Because if you go over to Asia, for example, you'll find a completely different culture. And that culture has things to teach you. But also you have things to teach that culture, right? So when East meets West, there is a synergy, right? You may learn a little bit more about this, they learn a little bit like this, and you get a synergy of culture. So you have sex between two cultures, right? But anyway, cultures have a tendency to don't masturbate, go blind, don't do this, don't have sex in public. So where are you most of the time? You're in public? Well, that's out. That's right out. Don't have sex in front of children. No, you're around children? No sex there. So cultures take, the tremendous creative experimental nature of life and sexuality, and they reduce it usually down to around 1%, right? So literally, chimpanzees have 10 times, 20 times more sex than the average human being. Why? Chimps can have sex in public. Old and young can have sex if you're a chimpanzee, right? It's pretty much, you feel like having sex? Have sex, That's, there's a little bit like, not that that's my woman, that's this is the alpha, whatever. But generally speaking, chimps sleep better, have more sex, have less stress, and eat organic food and don't pay rent, right? So there is an interesting process in cult development and cultural development where we take our basic drives of eating, sleeping, fucking, and procreating. So eating, sleeping, and fucking, and make them incredibly tedious. That's not the right clothing for this restaurant. A chimp doesn't have to worry about that. And a chimp eats 100% organic food when available and gets lots of exercise and fiber and all of that. So in some ways, cultures are at odds with life, right? If you are an incredibly sophisticated person, you probably have less sleep, less sex, and less nourishing good food, and less general freedom of spontaneous existence than an unsophisticated person. And an unsophisticated person probably has less sex, less quality sleep, less nourishing food, and less spontaneity and vitality than a chimp. In other words, we may have taken a few wrong turns, right? If we are fucking less, sleeping less, malnourished, both obese and with less nourishment, and with less exercise, and if we start hating ourselves and committing suicide, we've probably taken a few wrong turns. In other words, one of the interesting things about a cult is they're all self-referential. That's how you get narrower and narrower. Life is expanding bigger and bigger in every single moment. A cult is often getting smaller and smaller. A cult passes more laws every single year, but doesn't retire old laws, right? Let's pass this law, let's pass that law. So pretty soon, in order to plant a farm on your own field, you've got to get a permit from 3 departments. To plant food on your own land, you have to get a permit from 3 departments, for which you have to gather multiple documents. So you can see that what's most efficient, and 99.9% of life dies off, what's most efficient is what goes forward and contributes to the next iterations of life. Highly regulated cults, on the other hand, add more and more bureaucracy on living. You can't just fuck that person. You haven't learned their name. Okay, what is your name? My name is this. Can we fuck? No. I don't know. It's an outrageous thing. It's outrageous. What an insult. You want to procreate? No. You've got to take me on a date, several dates, and you've got to do this, and you've got to do that, and you've got to say this and not say that. You've got to subscribe to my, I mean, are we going to fuck? No. And you've got to pretend that you're more interested in my ideas. Otherwise, no, is out. It's out, right? And so this is progress. This is a sophisticated dance, right? Biological dance, life dance. Two healthy bodies want to feel pleasure, want to procreate. Off they go. Instant, right? No protocol, no names, no this, no that. Just a spontaneous, efficient fuck. You can generally measure the degree of cultural sophistication by the amount of unnecessary tedium and rituals that are placed between sleeping, eating, and fucking. An animal is hungry, they grab something and eat. Right? A very sophisticated person says, well, I'm feeling a bit peckish, right? How about we stroll down? First, we have to get dressed, stroll down the avenue and find a thing and wait for someone. We could just walk over to the buffet, but that's so uncivilized. No, let's have someone else deliver the food and take as much time as possible, and then serve it in little bits and then eat it and, just eat it, just cut it with this knife, then with that fork, then this. So basically a sophisticated person by cult code is the person that does as much unnecessary tedium between being hungry and actually eating, right? And they eat for other reasons other than hunger, like that's supposed to be a sophisticated thing to do, or they want to eat this, but they eat that first because that's what they do in the cult, right? So that's the tension, right? So life is constantly opening up possibilities, boundaries, and cultures are constantly threatened by the unknown, by being out of control, by uncertainty, and by the negative possibility that is part of life. Like if you look at a possibility field with think of a possibility field that happens, or a probability field that happens every 1,000 people. Like one person is schizophrenic every 1,000 people. Right? So if there's 500 people, there may not be any schizophrenics. But there may also only be one person in 1,000 that is a genius in mathematics. Right? So if you stay at 500, you don't get the genius in mathematics, and you don't get the schizophrenic. And it's a smaller probability field. But there are other probabilities that you don't get unless there are a billion people. One person in a billion in the probability field of the human species is like this. And one person in a billion is like this. So one person in a billion is like Hitler. Another person in a billion is like Buddha, right? So you get those two, right? If you have a billion people. Now, you don't just get them if they're 2 people. You don't get them if they're 5, right? As the number of people expand, like there are right now certain probabilities in the species that have not manifested because they require 100 billion people. Like there's 1 in 100 billion people that does this horrible thing, and there's 1 in this 100 billion people that does this wonderful thing. And we've never had a billion people, and so those people have not emerged out of the probability field. So the more people there are, the more positive and negative probabilities there are that correlate to numbers of people. 1 in 10,000, 1 in 100 million. And so you have to get a group to a certain size before you begin to see the rare probabilities at the edges, right? But we want the good without the bad, right? We want the Buddha, but no Hitler, right? But certain things become probable. Like if you take 10 trillion planets and they each house 100 billion people, so now you have 10 trillion planets, each housing 100 billion people. Within some of those planets, some of those people are going to do the most horrendous things imaginable. Statistically, it is a certainty. And within certain of those planets, people are going to be absolute saints like we've never seen. You think Buddha is good because he sat under a tree and renounced wealth and meditated for 20 years. That's nothing to what is probable. If you have 10 trillion planets, each with 100 billion people. Like there's going to be some people that, just one of them's probably going to give birth to universes, right? If you have enough, variety and enough talent and possibility, there's like one of them's going to crack the code and give birth to a new universe and figure it out, go back to the Big Bang and stuff. You create a big enough possibility, probability field, and more things become likely. More and more things that we like, and more things that we don't like, right? And that's kind of the way it is, right? We get to keep the probability field small. Like if we go out and drive our car more, we could run into some really amazing people, or we could have an accident, right? If we stay home, we won't have the accident and we won't meet those people, right? So it kind of goes with the territory. You expand the possibility field and the probability field in both directions. And then it's up to our skill, how we navigate that. So cults have been controlling sex and energy exchanges and spontaneity constantly, and our cults are some of the best at that. But, around the world, there's different degrees of sexual control. There's also emotional control. It's not appropriate to love this person. You're not married to them, but I feel the feeling. Well, shut it down. Don't talk about it. That just don't stop it. Just stop existing, right? You're not supposed to feel that. You're not supposed to think that, right? So this is the tension. Life is saying go forth and multiply and explore, and some of it will work out. I've got a good track record. You're part of life. Go out, trust, create, procreate, become more. And the culture is saying, no, don't say that. Don't say that idea. That's upsetting to this. Don't do that. That's upsetting to so and so. So life is, the cult is constantly trying to regulate and control and bureaucratize in order to make sure that the bad thing doesn't happen. But it's important to be aware that 99.9% of everything that has ever existed is now extinct. And the reason is that a more efficient, more productive design came along. And spending massive amounts of time, money, and natural resources trying to control as many people as possible to make sure that bad things don't happen guarantees one thing: incredible inefficiency of energy exchange, incredible blockades. This business didn't get started because they didn't get a permit before they ran out of money. And that business didn't give rise to this other business. And this technology never got invented because the person looked at it and said, fuck you. Fuck you. You're going to ask me to get a permit so that I can have a 10% chance of making money so that I can give half of it to you to do things I don't want to be done with my money? Fuck you. I'm going to just go out, swim on the beach, right? I'm not going to start a new company. Fuck you, right? So regulation destroys all those iterative adventures in business, in finance. And then the same regulation destroys 95% of all sex. You mean to give your body pleasure right now. You want me, first of all, to pretend that I'm not interested. Second, you want me to secretly learn about you. Third, you want me to bump into you from time to time and do this. Thirdly, you want me to propose. Fourthly, you want me to listen to all this bullshit you've got going on so that I can have sex with you? No, right? I'm not. I'll just watch porn. I'll watch a movie. I'll just have the thought, and it's just too tiring. It's too fucking tiring, right? So we regress, we progress from a chimp, but we also regress, right? And so 95% of our energy is being bottled up. What will they think? What will they think? What will they think? Now, this supposedly protects us from bad things happening. But what it absolutely guarantees is that other patterns of energy, less encumbered with minutia, will be more efficient than our species. Meaning if our species gets as regulated as bureaucrats would like them to become, we can absolutely guarantee that 1 trillion years from now, there will be no humans. Because another species coming along that just wants to create and live life will surpass it. Will surpass the species that is using a lot of its own energy to control a lot of its own energy rather than to generate and create something new.